Welcome to the Meet Me podcast, a podcast all about our multifaceted human nature and constant journey through self-discovery, with personal stories and insights around trauma, motherhood, relationships, spirituality, and individuality. I'm your host, Michelle Malik. Thanks for listening. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Meet Me podcast. As always, I'm your host, Michelle Malik, and I appreciate you listening. I had mentioned in my last episode that I was just laid off from my full-time corporate job. And before anyone feels bad for me, please know I am more than fine. I was actually actively looking to get out of that position before the layoff. And so it really just made it easier on me. And I am thinking about doing a separate episode in the future focused more around like manifestation and paying attention to synchronicities, where I do plan to share more of the details because some of the things that happened leading up to that point, as well as some of the things that followed, have really blown my mind in just how much some of the things that I was manifesting have really come to light. So I will share those in the future, but I really wanted to focus today's episode more around the idea of change and transition because, of course, even though I did want out of that position, being unemployed is still an adjustment. And this is actually the second time I've been laid off. And funnily enough, it was by the same company. But I wanted to share some of the shifts in perspectives that I've worked towards that have allowed me to embrace this layoff much differently than the layoff that I experienced previously. And a lot of the things that I've worked on in regards to my mindset around the idea of change has really helped me to further trust, the universe, God, the divine, whatever you feel resonates during any sort of redirection or difficult transition period. I have typically been someone that hates the idea of change. Growing up, I always had negative connotations around it because the amount of inconsistency in my home life, I always felt like change meant that something bad or worse was going to happen and wanted to feel some sort of stability by just clinging onto whatever I could to feel the same. I even have memories as far back as maybe second grade where I would have friends tell me that I changed because I started making friends with other groups. And I've just naturally been drawn to people of all different backgrounds and upbringings. And so I always had friends in a lot of different groups. And I remember just being told this by, some of my friends at the time. It made me question, okay, maybe I shouldn't be changing. Maybe I need to stay the same and kind of stay secluded in what it is that I know and not branch out. I have now really come to love and accept the idea of change because I recognize that it is a necessity in growing and evolving. Things can't move to the next stage if they always stay the same. So when I look back at my first time being laid off, which was in April 2020, the months and the weeks that were leading up to that day, of course, had a lot of fear and confusion going around. COVID first started making waves, and I remember the day that we were all told to work remotely until further notice because there was so much uncertainty around this disease and the numbers just kept rising. And during that time, of course, there was a lot of uncertainty in regards to our jobs and our stability because business was shifting as well. And I remember getting a lot of reassurance from my manager who had been with the company for over 20 years and never once saw a layoff during his time, even, during the '08 recession. There was just this air of confidence that we would remain unaffected. Even prior to COVID starting, I remember maybe early in the year of 2020, I was deemed an essential team member by my management just based on the strides that I had made in such a short amount of time. I was rewarded, certain accolades for my accomplishments with the company. But one Friday morning after our daily meeting, I received a surprise conference call from my two managers and was told that the company was forced to reduce staff. And although they fought to keep me, they had no say in the matter. And so my position was gone just like that. I remember feeling like I got punched in the gut when I heard this news, because on top of the world falling apart around me, it just felt like the work that I did and the accolades I received, the efforts that I put in, none of it mattered. And now I was left jobless, just like so many other people were during that time. And I couldn't help but just cry out of utter helplessness. I remember those first couple weeks, I fell into a pretty deep state of depression, and my anxiety just continued to run rampant from not only being scared to leave the house, but also just the uncertainty of when or how I would even fall into a new position with so many companies laying off their staff and closing down left and right. It just didn't feel like there were going to be any options available. I was unemployed for about 4 months before I was presented an opportunity to support a different team within the same company, which I realized was not long at all in the grand scheme of things. But I found that most of the time that I was unemployed, I was spending that time stressed out about what was going to happen next. With hindsight, of course, being 2020, when I got out of that phase, and even the months and years that followed, I remember looking back on that time and often wishing that I did things differently. Because had I not been worried so often, I could have used that time more efficiently and focused on the many things that I still had to be grateful for. Because underneath all of that stress, I was financially stable. We had those stimulus checks that ended up giving me the same, if not more, than what I was making regularly. I had so much more time at home to spend with my fiance, now husband, and pets, but especially the time that I had to myself to really develop things that I found interest in and filling my time with things that I enjoyed. I had started to get more in touch with my spirituality during that time and really kind of initiated the awakening journey that I continue on through to today. And so I always thought to myself that if I was given the opportunity again, I would not take it for granted and would take full advantage of that extra time. So leading up to this most recent layoff, about 3 years later, I had been working so much on my mindset and really trying to lean on the trust that everything is going to work out, even when it doesn't feel like it in the moment. And because I've had a lot of things kind of fall apart that I thought would go through, or efforts that I made that kind of felt like they weren't leading to anything. And so I really tried to make sure that I kept focus on the fact that just because things aren't working out right now, I know that I'm taking the necessary steps to get to where I want to be eventually. So I mentioned earlier that I was actively trying to find another job prior to this layoff happening. And so during that time that I was actively looking, I really felt myself in a difficult position because I was getting drained daily from a toxic work environment. So many changes were happening, and it just no longer felt like the job was aligned with who I was anymore, especially with all of the inner work that I was doing and trying to maintain a positive mindset. There were so many things outside of my control in that position that were hindering me from fully becoming the best version of myself. And so I had made the decision that the job has served its purpose for me and I was ready for a change. And so although there was a huge part of me that was hoping to lock in another position before having to leave that one, when I got the surprise conference call this time, there was not a single part of me that felt scared or worried, because I knew and I still trust that this is only putting me in a better position to receive what I know is meant for me and what I deserve. A work environment that is supporting, that feels safe and stable. And that trust, by the way, has taken years for me to fully cultivate. But it starts by accepting that there may be a better plan in place than what I had imagined. There's this burnt toast theory that I've seen circulating around that I've really worked to incorporate in my daily perspective. It's basically the idea that if you burn your toast making breakfast in the morning, the few minutes that it takes to remake the toast before heading out for, work or school may have actually saved you from a car accident. Or maybe by showing up late, it allowed you to meet somebody who became very important in your life. So where I would usually find myself getting enraged by burning the toast as I'm trying to rush out the door somewhere, I have really tried to welcome these little mishaps or redirections as much as possible. Now, of course, this isn't to say that I don't get frustrated when things don't go as planned, because trust me, I definitely do. And, even just this year, I have a long list of things that I thought would happen by now, or things that I wanted so badly that just didn't pan out. But even just by bringing attention and awareness to the possibility that some of these small annoyances or redirections, like burning my toast, could have actually been protecting me from harm or putting me in a more ideal position for something better, seeing it that way has really allowed me to accept when these things happen along my path. Sticking to this job example, a couple weeks prior to my layoff, I had 2 interviews with a different company that seemed pretty amazing. They paid extremely well and had directly expressed interest in me as a candidate. So I was really hoping to proceed through next steps in the process, maybe get an offer or some form of communication. But I ended up hearing nothing back even after my attempts of following up. And I think had this been a different time, I would probably be kicking myself for not getting what I thought was going to be the best opportunity for me. I likely would have spiraled over analyzing everything I did or said during the interview process that could have caused for this result. But I decided to see that as a clear sign that something better must just be on the horizon instead. I think that we tend to try really hard to control and prepare for every possible outcome so that when things happen unexpectedly or outside of the way that we envisioned, we feel lost or terrified because we didn't plan for it to play out in that way. And we can't really see the path clearly now that it's changed direction. So outside of trying to accept things for what they are and accept rejections as, redirections, another thing I've really worked on is surrender. Surrendering to what I don't have control over and not allowing those things to dictate how I move through different challenges. Trying really hard to stay focused on what's within my control and releasing anything that's not. Outside of work, of course, I have experienced so many other periods of huge transitions and change, many of which were extremely uncomfortable, very difficult, and hard to accept. But somehow those situations always managed to bring me to a better place eventually, even when sometimes it took days, weeks, or even years to realize it. I had said this in my last episode as well, but I truly couldn't count the amount of times that I felt lost or at rock bottom with no clear way out, only to eventually come back up to the surface, stronger and more determined than before, but with lessons that I could take with me moving forward. So I really encourage next time you may be going through a difficult period where it maybe feels like everything is getting ripped away or that there's just no hope for things to get better, try to find a bird's eye perspective. It can be really hard when we're in the thick of it to understand why we're experiencing such difficulties. Can't tell you how many times I want to bang my head against the wall and ask, why? Why is this happening? Why can't I catch a break? But just remember that there is still a full journey ahead of us that we can't see. So rather than staying stuck in the misery of a current situation and thinking about the worst possible outcome, try to shift your perspective and think of the best. And of course, by no means am I saying to not feel your feelings, because it's absolutely necessary to recognize what we're currently experiencing in our emotions, grieve when we need to grieve, scream when we need to scream, but don't let it take away the hope that something good can still happen. I will be the first one to say when I'm having a difficult time and how much a situation may suck in the moment, but like everything in life, those feelings are temporary. And so there will always be moments where it feels like everything is being taken away, but rather than seeing it as you being left with nothing, try to see it as a clean slate for a new beginning, something that you can build up upon or take fresh steps towards on a new path, knowing that maybe what you thought was best for you wasn't actually what was best for you, and that you may deserve better. Or maybe what you want is still for you, but the timing is just going to be different than you envisioned. So I wanted to share just a couple affirmations that may help when you're going through a transition period that can just bring you back to the present moment of understanding that this strain you're experiencing will eventually pass. I accept that the only constant in life is change and welcome it with open arms. I have made it through difficult times before and can do it again. I trust that things are working out for me, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. I am ready to embrace change as a necessary step in my evolution. I hope that those are words that you can repeat to yourself when you're going through a difficult transition period, welcoming change as an important part of the process. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode, and please be sure to rate and subscribe to never miss future episodes. I'm also really excited to share that I am providing free healing consultations for anyone who's interested in experiencing a private session with me. I realize that there's a lot of, mysticism or uncertainty around energy healing, and I really want to make it more accessible. So in these 15-minute calls that I'm offering, I can get a better understanding of what your prior exposure to energy healing is, answer any of your questions, and also provide direct insight on how a session could assist you with any particular focus areas you have in mind to hopefully give you the comfort and confidence to book a full session. You can book a consultation on the link in my Instagram bio at _Michelle Malik, or feel free to DM me to just book a full private session, as I do have those available as well. My healing collective is also back to doing group healing events, so be sure to follow us at Enlightened Healing House to be in the know for those as well. Thanks so much for your time listening, and I can't wait to share with you next time.